Hello, everyone, and welcome to PAEA's third webinar. Tonight, Jes Noel will speak about bringing a visiting artist into the classroom. Registered participants will receive a Google Form link via email in a day or two to fill out for their 1 hour of Act 48 credit. Before we begin the webinar, we are asking participants to mute their microphones and keep their video off. Those controls are located in the bottom corner of the controls bar. We are also asking everyone to sign in on the chat roll. Please use the same name in which you registered for this event. The chat roll can be found along the bottom in the controls bar as well. Signing in will ensure that you receive the Act 48 link. Let's get this webinar rolling. Jes will now share her experience with visiting artists.
Okay. All right, so hi everybody. My name is Jes Noel and I have a lovely PowerPoint to share with you. So just bear with me while I get it up and running. All right, okay. Dun, dun, dun. Is it gonna work? No. All right, so I'm just gonna do it like this because I can't figure out how to get it bigger right now at the moment. I'm gonna fair warn you that it is very, very windy up here in northeastern Pennsylvania, so hopefully we do not get disconnected tonight. So I'm gonna talk to you tonight about bringing a visiting artist into the elementary classroom. This is an experience that I did last year with my primary students. So before we talk more about that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. So I've been a primary art teacher in northeastern Pennsylvania at Danville Primary School for the past 10 years. So that means that I teach only kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, and I have about 575 students. I am the current PAEA Elementary Division Director, and I received the PAEA Outstanding Elementary Art Teacher of the Year Award in 2015. So as a primary art teacher, last year I decided to bring in a blacksmith to teach my students more about building. So I know you're probably thinking, a blacksmith in a primary school? Yes, I did. I very much brought a blacksmith into the school with my kids. So first I'm going to talk to you about how you find your artist. So I kind of went about this backwards. I found my artist by asking around in my community. So, oh, sorry guys. Don't know why it keeps opening as a separate window like that. No, don't do that. Okay, sorry about this. Here we go. Okay, so I actually did one about this backwards. So most people go through their arts council and get an artist that way that's already been pre-screened. And I found an artist through asking the people in my community. So I reached out to a fellow teacher in my area and he recommended Doug Firestone. So Doug Firestone is a trained blacksmith who has Firestone Forge, which is actually 2 hours north of where I live here in Danville, Pennsylvania. So in meeting with Doug and discussing with him, he agreed to do this visiting artist program with a 2 hour difference. And I'll talk about that a little bit later about how we accommodated that time difference and that distance. So you can find your artist a bunch of different ways. I found my artist by myself, which was a lot of fun. So how did I handle a long distance relationship with my visiting artist? Let me see, there we go. So Doug was really great. For being a blacksmith, he was very tech savvy. So we would Skype, we would email, we would talk on the phone. He even would text, which was awesome, especially when it was getting down to him coming to visit and I might have a little question in the middle of the day. He could get back to me really quick. And he even used emojis, which made things so much fun that he would put emoji in there. And then we also used Google Docs. That was a huge time saver for us because we could be working on documents at the same time. Now, this was a huge deal in making my visiting artist program a huge success. We brought the studio to the classroom. So Doug's studio is over 2 hours away from where my students go to school. So obviously we couldn't bring Doug's all of his heavy tools, all of his equipment. Obviously, he's working with fire, he's working outside. We couldn't bring that directly to my students. So what we did was we did a flipped classroom experience, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So I was able to get my administration to approve a road trip. I was given a day along with our tech ed teacher to go up to Doug's studio. We road trip up in the middle of winter, bundled up, and we created 2 videos that I viewed to my students prior to Mr. Firestone's arrival. So the videos were honestly a game changer for us, because the moment Mr. Firestone walked into the building, the kids already knew who he was. He needed 0 introduction because we pre-screened the videos, the 2 videos, 2 weeks in advance. So the videos, the first video, as you can see here, is Mr. Firestone is forging a nest hook. So this is him actually working with fire and heat. And as you can tell, it's cold. That's me all bundled up. My kids thought it was so cool to see me on camera, and, you know, and I'm very much not a celebrity, you know, I'm not a newscaster, but they thought it was so cool to see their art teacher on the screen. So this video is him forging an S-hook outside and with his tools. Now, this video over here, video number 2, is we kind of did a Q&A session with him for the kids to get to know Mr. Firestone better. At the end of my presentation here, I will share with you my Google Drive link, and the videos are all embedded here. They're all available on YouTube. So the second video was me asking him questions. Now, we did field these questions in advance. My tech teacher, Paul, and I came up with some questions. We emailed them to Doug, and Doug kind of knew what he was getting into before we sat down. So here we are, we're inside his studio. We had mics, and Paul, my tech teacher, was behind the camera. So by no means am I a newscaster. I definitely did not miss my calling there. Paul did a great job editing it because I was so nervous. But the kids really gained a lot of information about Mr. Firestone as a person and as an artist. And we geared the questions to, you know, things that my students are interested in, but also about who he is and what he does as an artist, how he got into his line of work, all those fun things. Now, video number 3 here is about after Mr. Firestone visited with us, we had done a whole kind of montage of who our school was, who Mr. Firestone was, his experience with the children, and the end product. So this was a really cool video that the kids can go back and view. It was also really great for the parents and faculty members and school board members and community members to understand, hey, this is what's going on inside of our school. So this was a really great PR video for us to kind of showcase, this is what we're doing in our art department here at DMBell. So that was a lot of fun. And I mean, these videos are some of my favorite things that came out of this experience. So again, this was doing a flipped classroom, and again, video 1 and video 2, we're teaching the students about Mr. Firestone before he even stepped into the door. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is money. Where did I get my money for a visiting artist? So obviously you're bringing in a trained professional into your classroom, and they're going to look for some sort of compensation for their time, their energy, materials, things like that. So I went through my arts council, and I'll talk about a little bit about all the different arts councils in the state of Pennsylvania. So where I'm located in northeastern Pennsylvania, I worked with the Bradford County Regional Arts Council. So I was able to match funds with them, and that was something that they came to my school. I sat down with my administration and my liaison from the Bradford County Arts Council, and we came up with numbers, we came up with pricing, and different things like that. So I really leaned on my building principal when it came to the numbers end of things, because we were matching funds. So some other money that we got came through our home and school. We have a really phenomenal home and school association that helped with various things throughout, from feeding Doug when he was here for the week that we were putting him up, to different things like that. We also were able to receive Title IV funds, which with the way that the new Every Student Succeeds Act works, Title IV funds are available. And that's something you have to talk to your administration about, because they might choose to put that money towards something else. But it is worth taking a shot and seeing if possibly you can get some funds for your program. The next thing I did was I got a lot of donations from staff. So you're going to see here at the end product that was sculpture that was built that is permanently on display outside of my school, and it was all made out of scrap metal because we found that buying metal was very, very expensive and we needed to cut costs. So we decided to build our sculpture with scrap metal. And so I reached out to my school community, and it was amazing the amount of people that turned out and gave us metal from various things. And they were a huge asset in helping us do this for a very small price in building our sculpture. And then again, along with reaching out to the staff in my building, I also reached out to various community members. Danville is a relatively small town, and if you reach out to people, they're so willing to help you if you ask. A lot of times community members feel like they're not involved enough in the schools, so I found that they were really willing to go above and beyond to help make it a smashing success. All right, so when I'm talking about your Council of the Arts and doing a visiting artist with them, you can see here in this map, and I swiped this map from the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts, so you can go to their website and you can view this map yourself. So I'm right here in Montour County, so all of this light blue is my entire region. So the Bradford County Arts Council is all the way up here, almost at the New York border. So here's another group of people, along with Mr. Firestone, who I'm working with, that are over 2 hours away from me. But they were willing to come to my school and see what was happening, and they were willing to meet with me. Again, we talked a lot on the phone. We did a lot of emailing back and forth. So you can see here, depending on where your school falls, that you have a different group that you're working with, and they were a phenomenal resource in helping me attain funds. And like I said, if you don't have a specific artist picked out in advance, kind of like I did, I went about this backwards. They have a list of artists that they can share with you, and you can find one that fits best for your school community and for the budget that you're looking at, for the length of time you're looking at. The one great thing about bringing a visiting artist into the classroom is that it can vary so much, and it can be what you want it to be. So that's really up to you how much you want to dedicate to this. All right, so Mr. Firestone obviously is 2 hours away from us. So how did I accommodate him for the week that he was here? So I really lucked out, and one of the teachers in my school district owns a B&B. And so I reached out to her, and she was able to set us up with a really great reduced price. And she housed Mr. Firestone for the week in her B&B. Excuse me. So we obviously had to feed Mr. Firestone for the week. So at the B&B, he got breakfast every morning. That was part of the agreement that her and I had made. And then I provided him lunch every day. And then Home and School had given him gift cards to local establishments in the area, and that fed him, that he could feed himself for dinner. So obviously your artist might be a local artist and can commute daily to you. So you don't have to worry about housing. You don't have to worry about feeding them. Obviously you do want to give them lunch. They're in your building. If they are there for the whole day, maybe they're only there for the afternoons. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So we obviously housed him and we fed him all 3 meals. And it worked out really great because here was somebody who was a school employee, so who was really able to go above and beyond in helping Mr. Firestone have a really great experience. So now, obviously, like I said, every schedule can be different. So our schedule, what we did was we work in a 6-day cycle. So obviously we wanted Mr. Firestone here Monday through Friday because he was driving over 2 hours to be down here with us. So what we did was I took my 6-day cycle and I consolidated it into 5 days. So in order for that to work, I made a modified schedule. And obviously I got permission from my administration to do this. So I was able to get all of my duties covered. Anywhere there, I had a planning period, I was filling with a class. So it was a packed day. And I will have to say Mr. Firestone was a phenomenal sport about this. Now I chose to do this with my entire school. You can choose to do it with just a specific class, grade. That's up to you as the teacher, how much you want to do or how little you want to do. I'm not gonna lie, our motto was go big or go home. So it's kind of, when I tell people what we did, they look at me like I'm a little crazy. But honestly, if you have the support and you have an artist who you trust and that you have a relationship with, it's pretty amazing what you can accomplish. So we took 6 days, stuck them into 5 days. I created a modified schedule. Now, Mr. Firestone came about the 3rd week of March. You would think snow would be over, but unfortunately it was not. We got a freak snowstorm and we had a snow day in the middle of his week. So I felt horrible about this, but obviously I cannot control the weather. So Mr. Firestone graciously agreed to come back the following morning to finish out the program with the students. So he didn't have to do that, but that just was like to his character of a person and as an artist, that he was willing to come back down on Monday to finish up the program, and then he drove back home Monday night, which was super sweet of him. Something else that I really loved that we took advantage of was we did something called Lunch with the Artist. Now this was something I worked with our guidance counselor. So what we did was every day Mr. Firestone got an hour lunch. And this gave me time in my classroom to kind of get things organized and sorted and kind of a little bit of a brain break for myself, because when you're having an artist in your space, in your classroom, you're the hostess. So you're constantly on, you're constantly working with them. So it was kind of nice for me to have a break. But what we did was Mr. Firestone and our guidance counselor had lunch with a select handful of different students each day. And these were students that I had reached out to, teachers and administration, and asked, these are kids that had shown an interest in blacksmithing and the trades. And it was just a really great way for Mr. Firestone and our guidance counselor to have a small group lunch. And this was probably, I can't even explain how awesome an experience this was for those students who had that opportunity for a little one-on-one time. And it was a really great way for Mr. Firestone to, he'd been working in large class settings all day long, to finally get a little more one-on-one time with the students. And I know our guidance counselor said it was a phenomenal experience. He was like, couldn't believe how well it had gone over. And Mr. Firestone did this every single day. During his hour-long lunch break, I would get him his lunch, I'd bring him his lunch, and he would have it with the students and our guidance counselor. So that was just kind of something fun that we came up with. And again, you don't have to do this kind of stuff, but he was here in the building, and I had kind of brought up as like, what are your thoughts? Because maybe some artists don't want that. They want an hour of alone time, and that's totally justified. But he thought this was a great idea, and he wanted to spend more time with the students. So he went above and beyond doing that. So that was a really cool experience that we had. All right, so I've talked about bringing him here, what kind of those extra things, how we made that schedule. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is what the students actually did with Mr. Firestone. So as I said earlier, I only teach kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade. So 8-year-olds are my oldest group of students in my building. So you can see over here in this lower right-hand slide is a model of a train. So what we did was, we are the Danville Ironmen, and we are known in our community for forging and the T-rails. So we have a huge train history in our community, and that's really important. So this whole project was based on the idea of who we were as a community and our history. So trains are a huge part of who we are. So the 2nd grade students created engines out of clay, and they worked in small groups which then came together to form an engine. So each 2nd grade class made an engine. Now, before we did this with the students, obviously they already knew Mr. Firestone. They already had all this prior knowledge about forging and making things with metal. And so we were explaining to them that clay is the basic molding idea. Before you create anything large scale with a sculpture, you work with clay on a smaller modular scale before you get your idea. So that was a really neat idea for them to understand, a great concept, because clay is something that we use in the classroom, and it was something they related to, and we were able to apply it to a bigger concept. So 1st grader students here are creating the train cars that hold the logs that were cut down in the forest that were hauled down. So they were in charge of making all the log cars. And then kindergarten, obviously, they are only 5 and 6. You can see here that they created the landscape that the trains would then sit on once they came out of the kiln. So they had train tracks on it, but then what they had to do was they had to create the forest. So we brainstormed and we talked about what were things that you found in Pennsylvania forest. We talked about animals, we talked about trees, we talked about bodies of water. So that was a really great way to kind of get a little more geography going on into what was happening. So we had 3 parts, and we would bring them all together to create one large piece of art. And I'll talk about a little bit here later about how we displayed that art and what we ultimately did with it. All right, so this was all happening while Mr. Firestone was here and visiting us for a whole week. But we didn't stop there. Like I said, here at Danville, we like to go big or go home. So what we then decided was that, and this was in the very beginning stages before we agreed to anything, before we signed on Mr. Firestone, and we were looking at the numbers. We decided this idea all came from the fact that my principal wanted a giant train made out of iron for the front of the school. So I looked at him and I said, well, blacksmith is not in my wheelhouse, so let's see what I can do. And that's ultimately how I came to bring a visiting artist into my classroom, was I had this idea that I couldn't do myself. I had to build a team. I had to find the people who could do it. All right, so we've decided we're gonna build a giant train to put outside of my school as a permanent sculpture. So we had decided, obviously, like I said earlier, that buying our own metal was way too expensive and not in our budget. So we had collected scrap metal from various community members, school members, and I had, when Mr. Firestone arrived, a giant pile of scrap metal over by our maintenance shed. And Mr. Firestone brought his trailer with him, and upon leaving, we filled his trailer up with all of this scrap metal, and he took it back with him to a studio in Germania, Pennsylvania. So here are some photos. He did a really awesome job documenting this entire process for our students. He would take photos, he would drop them in the Google Drive so I could keep the students up to date with what was going on back in Germania, Pennsylvania. So digital technology was a huge resource to us to make this so successful. So here you can see this is the railing that he created that everything would ultimately go on. This is just spray paint on the ground basically it's the layout of what this was going to look like for the students. So this was a really cool for the kids to understand what was actually happening. It was more of a puzzle for them. So Mr. Firestone documented this entire process. This process went well into the summer. So Mr. Firestone came and visited us the 3rd week in March. He left at the end of that week, and he proceeded to work on this all of April, May, and June. So he worked on this project for 3 months with us. All right, so now we have a giant train, 8 feet tall, 32 feet long, big piece of material. So what we did was we found, Mr. Firestone had a friend who had a trailer who was willing to bring this giant piece of art down to us. So they drove it down one June morning. And I have a wonderful group of maintenance men in my building. And here are the pictures of them installing one sunny June morning, our giant 8 foot by 32 foot long train. So here is the trailer that Mr. Firestone had gotten access to. Now you can see here that there's a forklift. So I really lucked out on this because this would have been a huge budget eater. We actually we were adding an addition to our high school, and there was already a forklift on premise. So we were able to secure through the construction company the use of this forklift one morning. And so they actually just drove it over and lifted this train up off the cart, as you can see here, and then they had installed it. Now, my maintenance men are an amazing group of men. They actually went up to Mr. Firestone's studio. They measured the train. They had pre-drilled holes. They had all this at one point down here at the bottom was actually landscaping with bushes and stones. They took all that out and they poured concrete in for us so that we could properly install this piece of artwork. So, I mean, I could have never done any of this. I mean, this is not my wheelhouse at all. So I had a really wonderful group of people who supported this project. I had administration who allowed this project to happen. Because they AOK'd all of these projects that the maintenance men were doing. So this was just the install day. So obviously this got installed in June. So you're thinking, well, how are the kids gonna see it? How are you, what are you doing? It's June. How is this happening? So we then had decided before school was let out that we have to somehow celebrate this. So we, in the middle of July, had a giant unveiling. So the way we did this was in our community in Danville, we have something called the Danville Heritage Festival. So this was in July. And so what we did was we actually kicked off the festival. So I was in communication with the Danville Heritage community and committee. And they were like, we love this idea. You can kick off the festival. This is a great way to tie everything together. So here you can see, this is us unveiling it. So we actually tarped the train so that nobody could see it. So it just looked like this big lumpy mass outside of our school. But we unveiled it. We had a local performer come in and he dressed in traditional iron gear, or what a person who worked on the train line would be wearing. And he sang some traditional songs. We had make and takes that were run by our local high school students. We had coffee and cupcakes that were provided by local businesses in the area. And we had a phenomenal turnout. We were floored for a random day in July. To have hundreds of people show up was phenomenal. I mean, I didn't even have words. Excuse me. I didn't even have words for how many people showed up. So the other things that we did at the festival, so here kind of gives you an idea of some people that showed up. So we had community members, we had parents, we had families, we had students. We had students singing some train songs as part of the performance. Here, I'm sorry that this photo is not bigger, is actually the trains that the students had made out of clay earlier in the year with Mr. Firestone. So what we ended up doing, because as you saw on the previous slide, when Mr. Firestone was here, the clay had not been fired. So after he left, I fired everything, and then we did not use glaze. What we did was we used oil pastel, and then we dipped everything in Black India ink for the display. So we had these displayed all along the tables, and we also were able to purchase some books that were all about the steel town and about it, which we really liked this book because it talked greatly in depth about forging iron, and it really circled back to what Mr. Firestone had been teaching the students about forging and the process. All right, so I'm talking about all these crazy things that we did, and how did I get the community involved? How did people find out about it? So I'm going to tell you right now, promote, promote, promote. If you want your program to be as successful as possible, you have to PR. It's kind of part of your gig for this kind of stuff, because you want to celebrate what you've done. You've spent all this time, you've spent all this money, you've gotten people involved. So we really lucked out. Our local newspaper is really great. When we reach out to them, they come in, they talk to us, they take photos. So I had them come in the entire process from beginning to end. And so they were getting it in the local newspaper, which was awesome. We were also reaching out to different artists in the community. They were another great resource for us. I was able to use the PAEA blog. So you are all PAEA members. If you reach out, you can actually write an article for the blog, and you can share your information and your story that way. I even went through the Pennsylvania State Education Association. If you are part of the union, we have a magazine that goes out every month. I reached out to them. They wrote a beautiful article about our entire project and really highlighted something amazing that we were doing here in the arts community. So, and the other thing, we even made it on our local news station. So we made it on TV. So obviously I live up here in northeastern Pennsylvania. So it might be a little easier based on where you live. If you're a little more rural, you might get a little more TV time versus a more urban area. But it's always worth reaching out to those organizations. They're looking for those positive stories to share. And you've worked so hard that it deserves to be celebrated. So the other thing I did do was, obviously Mr. Firestone was 2 hours away from us. I reached out to his newspaper, his news station, and different things like that. And they responded, and obviously they didn't send anybody down, but if I shared photos and wrote things, they would publish them in his paper and where he was from. So I was able to also kind of acknowledge what he was doing in his community, even though we were 2 hours removed. He still deserved to be honored and celebrated. So promote, promote, promote. PR all the way, that is for sure. Okay, so obviously I had so many people helping me. I could not have done this without all of their help. So from people who donated gift cards, from my wonderful coworker who let Mr. Firestone stay at her B&B, to people who donated scrap metal. I kept a running list in my classroom of anyone who donated scrap metal. And as you can see here, we got some really random things, but we were all able to use them. So even if you donated one muffin tin, I wrote your name down on my list. And so before our big community unveiling, all those people who had donated on my big long list got a formal invitation from administration inviting them to our unveiling. And I also have personal handmade student thank you notes. I'm a big believer in a thank you note. I'm a big believer in it coming from the students, because this truly was for them. And this was a life-altering experience for them. So I also wrote some personal thank you notes myself as an art teacher. And then we also did a really phenomenal thank you for Mr. Firestone. So if you watched the videos that I had told you about earlier, the third video that gave a really nice overview of our project, you learned that Mr. Firestone is red-green color deficient. So I cannot take any credit for this. My technology teacher went above and beyond. He actually reached out to Valspar, and they sponsored a pair of glasses. So if you're not familiar with this, there are special glasses that are made for people with color deficiency so they can see color for the first time. So we thanked Mr. Firestone for spending a whole week with us and for everything that he did for us by giving him a pair of glasses. And if you watch the third video that is on the earlier slide, you will see his reaction. And it was a really cool experience for everyone involved. But honestly, you know, I couldn't thank him enough for everything that he did for our community, for our students, for our faculty. I really lucked out finding a phenomenal artist who worked well with our community. All right, so once school started back up, Mr. Firestone actually came back down for a day in September, and we took the students out. Now, kindergarten students, obviously it's a new school year. They're brand new kids. They're not familiar with what's going on. So we only did this with our second graders and our first graders because they had been there the year before and had already interacted with Mr. Firestone. So what they did was we took every class outside, and we created a special schedule that day with the help of my building principal to accommodate all of second grade and all of first grade to be able to meet with Mr. Firestone. So he explained to them how he had made the train, and we had made a really nice PowerPoint of his entire documentation process up in Germania. We talked about how we installed it, and then we went outside and we actually viewed the sculpture, and we talked about the sculpture, and we interacted with it. And it was also really nice. Here you can see there's Mr. Firestone talking about the train, and the kids are asking questions, they're interacting with it. So it was a really great way to wrap up everything, especially for the kids who didn't come to the unveiling in July. We had all this hype, we had built everything up, but if you didn't come in July, you were away on vacation, you kind of missed that. So this was a great way to kind of bring it all back together for the students so that they could really understand, hey, this is where we had left off in the spring, this is where we are now in the fall. All right, so what I wish I had known before I had started the process. Like I said, this is can be very overwhelming. Working with an arts council was really great because they kind of gave me some insider information as a first-time art teacher doing this project. So they were a great resource for me. I could not have done this without my team. I could not have done this without my building principal. I could not have done this without my director of curriculum. I could not have done this without my technology teacher. I could not have done this without Doug. And working in a school environment that was very supportive of this project was so crucial. So really just reaching out to people. You have to admit to yourself that, you know, I can't do this all myself. And if you want it to be successful, you need to kind of know who can I share this with, who can help me, without overwhelming anyone. So you got to have your team, and you can't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, I knew zero about forging when I started this project, and now I've made a friend for life in Mr. Firestone, and I've learned so much along with my students in this process. The other thing that was really crucial for me was meeting my artist before I agreed to anything, before I signed any documents, any money. I met with Mr. Firestone. I teach in a primary school. that not all people are comfortable in a room full of 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. So I needed to know that my artist would be successful and this would be a positive experience for my students. And Mr. Firestone is a very large gentleman, and as you saw in the video in my screen here, he's got a big beard, he has a ponytail, you know, wore his flannel, but he was truly a gentle giant. And meeting him before I agreed to anything really soothed any anxiety I had about this experience, because I wanted this to be a positive experience for my students, and I needed an artist who was going to understand how 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds work, and was going to be okay with being asked, what's your second favorite color? You know, and he really took those kids' questions to heart and was patient and kind with them and answered all their questions, which was just such a heartwarming experience, because you want someone who's gonna enjoy the time with your students. You don't want it to be draining for them. You don't want it to be boring for your students. You want it to be a positive experience all around. So that was so crucial for me, was having an artist who I knew was gonna be successful in my classroom. And it also is important that you know that you can work with that artist, because obviously, you know, as any adult, you interact with people, you might have coworkers that you don't necessarily gel with. And to find an artist who's, you know, working in your classroom, working in your environment, you need to find someone who's going to fit. So I really lucked out in finding Mr. Firestone, finding a positive artist who was a good fit for all of us. So here I have my timeline, because I know this is a lot of information. And like I said, you can make it as big or as small as you want as an educator. So we started this in the summer of 2017. The idea was proposed and we found our artist. In the fall, we met with our artist, we met with my administration, we met with the Arts Council. This is where we really hammered out a lot of numbers. What's this going to look like? When are we going to do this? In October, we created our materials list. Again, we were working on logistics. There was a lot of phone conversations going on between myself, Mr. Firestone, my Arts Council, and my administration. Once we did that, in December, when it was nice and cold, we went and did our road trip to make our videos. We continued to collect donations through January and February. In March, Mr. Firestone came to visit. Something I forgot to mention was in April, we have our annual Celebrate the Arts Night. So what we do is every spring, we have an evening event that we showcase all of our specials. So that is art, Spanish, music, PE, STEM, and technology. That's our 6th special. So it's this evening showcase. So I have an art show every year. There's make and takes, there's different activities through all of our various programs. But what we also did that night was we plugged Mr. Firestone and his train, what he was building. So he lovingly came down with his wife that night, met with parents, met with students, and talked about, hey, this is what I'm building. This is when the unveiling is. You know, hopefully you can come join us in July and see this happen. So that was a really great way to get the buy-in from the parents even more. We had already shared the videos with them, but here was Mr. Firestone in the flesh at our Celebrate the Arts Night, at our art show, where people were really able to interact with him. And the kids had already been with Mr. Firestone and already met him and interacted with him. So it was great to be like, see the students go, hey, mom, dad, come here, let's go talk to Mr. Firestone. And so that was a really awesome thing. And I was so happy that Mr. Firestone agreed to come down on a Thursday night in April to meet with our community and our parents. So that was just a really fun time for everybody involved. So in May, our maintenance men, our building team went up and they visited Mr. Firestone in his studio to get some measurements of our train. We delivered and installed it in June, as I showed you in our slides. July was our kickoff, and in September he came back and he followed up with the students and staff. So the last thing I kind of want to talk to you about is we have a lot of different resources here. So again, these are live links that if you go into my Google Doc, you can actually click on these and they'll take you right to the sources. But this is the PowerPoint that Mr. Firestone did of the entire process. And these are all different articles that I used when I did my PR, from the local press to the PAEA blog post to the PSEA voice. Just great ways to showcase everything that we had done as a community and as a school. So I would like to thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. And again, I apologize that I could not figure out how to get my slideshow much bigger than what it is. But this is my email if you want to reach out if you have any questions. Because like I said, the first time you take on a visiting artist, it can be very overwhelming. And reaching out to people who have done it before is a huge resource and very helpful in making your experience a little more smoother. And then this is also the link to the presentation itself. So I will copy and paste that and put that in the comments below. So if you, I'm going to pull up the comments here if I can figure it out, and hopefully we'll see if there is anything that you guys would like to know more about. Stop share. So,
all right. Wow, that was a lot of great information. So we definitely have time for questions.
yeah.
And Jes is going to copy that awesome Google presentation link into the chat roll for everybody. That would be fantastic, because I know that was one of the questions I had, is if she could put that link in there for us. But definitely please use the chat roll for any questions that you may have for our presenter. And yes, were you able to copy and paste that?
No, I barely copied the wrong thing, so I'm going to do it right. I'm working on it right now.
Okay.
My apologies. I went to paste it and it was the wrong thing.
Ah.
Okay.
It looks like Angela has a visiting artist coming next year for a mosaic. That's awesome.
Awesome. Yes, congratulations. You'll have a really great time with it. I apologize, Jill. Somehow you minimized again and I can't find anything to post it. It'll take me a little longer, but I will find it. I promise you. I don't know why my computer keeps doing this.
Oh, it's collapsing your window again?
Yes, and I don't understand, but it is what it is.
Is there one of those little arrows near the bottom of the screen to pop it back out? Sometimes those little arrows pop up in the corners to stretch it back
You're
out.
so smart. Thank you. Okay, there we go. I finally got it, everybody.
Woohoo! Awesome link.
Awesome. So, Kelly, that is so exciting that you are doing your big reveal. So I hope you got some really cool ideas from listening tonight. And like I said, we kind of go big or go home. So, you know, anything you can do is just a great way to celebrate your students and your artists. It's just a wonderful time to showcase because you put so much time and energy into it. It's like you just want to tell everyone. And like I said, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to share more resources with you or just kind of talk, because at times it did get to be a little overwhelming, but I had a wonderful team of people who helped me out.
All right, do we have any more questions? All right, I think that may be it. We'll just let it up to everybody else to contact you as they need. I know you'll be a great resource if I ever decide to bring somebody in, because that sounds fantastic. And you definitely did go big or go home. That was a lot. It was awesome. So,
Thank
and I
you.
love that you actually had that large sculpture left over at the end to share with your community and the students as a lifelong reminder for those kids, because you know when they're old and grown and they drive by the school, they'll remember that they had a part in that. So I think that's an amazing memory, you know, that you've given these children. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. It is really cool to hear them already get so excited about it and be like, this is this. And it's just, I mean, it makes my heart really full, and, you know, to know that it was such a positive experience for everyone involved. It was well worth all the time and energy.
Definitely. Absolutely fantastic. Looks like someone says that's who I just work with. Contact me if you have any questions. Cool.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in tonight, and I hope you enjoy your Monday morning.
Yep. And I'm just going to end us off here with, we really hope you enjoyed your time with us tonight. We have 2 more quick things to share before we go. First, we want to share the registration link for our next webinar to be held in April. Christopher Sweeney, 2016 Pennsylvania Art Education Association Outstanding Secondary Art Educator of the Year, will be sharing details from his studio and classroom on how to incorporate 3D printing and digital fabrication techniques into your existing curriculum. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that into the chat roll. So there should be the link for that if you're interested. And just a reminder to please make sure that you do sign in on the chat roll to verify your participation in tonight's webinar. And remember to check your email for the Act 48 link coming in the next day or 2. So, and unless anybody has any other questions, then that's a wrap. And we're just going to say goodnight to everyone.